USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com, featuring conversations with college hockey coaches and players and journalists who cover the sport.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Tuesday, March 17th, 2020. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Well, the dust is still settling on the whirlwind of events that happened in college hockey and, in fact, in all of sports and all of life last week. But we wanted to take a moment to have a retrospective on what's going on.
And joining us now on this special edition of USCHO Spotlight, he was the chair of this year's Division I Men's Ice Hockey Committee, Deputy Athletic Director at the University of New Hampshire, and he will be the new Commissioner of Hockey, Steve Metcalf. Steve, what a crazy week last week was, a roller coaster of emotions for so many. And in the end, the most unfortunate ending probably for the college hockey season, but for many different collegiate sports seasons, in the ultimate cancellation of the season. How difficult of a week was last week for you as the chair of the committee? I assume that your days were long and the conversations were difficult.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for having me on. Last week was really, a week like no other in sports in general, but certainly in college sports, and just really a very quickly evolving situation as the week went on. And no question, the right decisions were made at the end of the week, but it was just changing so quickly. And, there was certainly a time, maybe middle of the week last week, I was thinking to myself, and I talked to Joe, several times, Joe Battaglia, and, I kind of thought we could still play a little bit more hockey. And maybe instead of doing a 2 out of 3 series, we do a 1-game series. And, but things just developed so quickly. And, I think a lot of people in the sports world have mentioned the Utah Jazz player, getting infected, and then the NBA coming to a screeching halt as a real pivot point. And I think I guess I'm losing track of my days now. I don't know if it was Wednesday or Thursday. We actually had a call with all the regional sites. And at that particular moment in time, we were thinking we were going to play hockey, but we were going to play with no fans. And probably within 24 hours, everything came to an end with the NCAA. And it just, funny, the timing of all this, we had calls, at the end of last week with the folks in Detroit that, were already one of our scheduled calls, regularly scheduled calls. And so then we didn't end up having the call, obviously, because it was really not much to talk about. And I think people just completely stunned. And, this is not taking anything away from, everyone making the right decision in the end to try and be safe and contain the spread of the virus by, all the recommendations that have been made. But, I think just stunning for the sports world. And, I'm sure I speak to you guys as well, where we were at the beginning of last week and where we are today is a lot different.
You mentioned, I guess it was Wednesday night, that the NBA basically shut everything down in a very sudden move as a player was tested positive for COVID-19. And that was, as you said, it was the pivot point. You would think to make a decision to cancel anything at the NCAA level, where they really their heart and soul is running championships. They administrate sports, but they really run championships as kind of the heart and soul of the NCAA. So you would think it would be such a difficult decision. But was the decision at the end of the day one that was just seemed like an automatic, that you didn't really have any choices?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think what happened is, all of our conferences were having pretty regular conference calls with, all the schools. And when we finally, as Hockey East, decided to, bring our hockey season to the end, the phone conversation literally lasted 3 minutes. Everyone knew what was going to happen. There was a motion made, quickly seconded, very little discussion, and that was the end. And then basically everyone had to jump off and go and start dealing with, other conferences, talking to the folks on campus, talking to the, in many cases, the president, and obviously the coaches and the athletes, and trying to make plans for, what everyone was doing and where they were going to be going, or whether they were going to be coming back to campus, all those kind of things. Everything was moving so quickly. And I had traded some messages with Kristen Fassbender at the NCAA. So, her and I were in touch as we went through this. And at some point she called me and said, "Hey, we're going to like emergency staff meeting." And, the impression I got was, the staff meeting was obviously, her bosses and whatnot, and Mark Emmer and those folks were talking about it. And then they broke the news to the staff, and obviously that quickly cascaded out. And, but, it was a period of hours, I think, between when we were talking about trying to do regionals with no fans to not doing any NCAA championships, just, a very short amount of time, and everything just changed so quickly.
Obviously, you kind of made a mention earlier of the city of Detroit, and that's obviously a city that has been rebuilding on its own, really for the last 15, 20 years. And it's this losing such an event like the Frozen Four, the men's Frozen Four, has to be devastating. What are the conversations? And I don't even know if you're still privy to them, but are there conversations to try to make the city whole, have another championship? I don't even know if it's functional to ask if you could push everybody back a year, and next year would be in Detroit, and everything after that would just fall 1 year down the road. But are there conversations to try to help out Detroit after really losing an event that they spent probably a lot of money trying to plan?
Yeah, we haven't started to have conversations about the future sites for the championship yet, and I guess those conversations were probably going to start in Detroit this year when we're all together. And so I think that's something we'll take up over the next couple of weeks. I'm sure the committee will have some time together, at least on the phone, and then trying to just look forward to see whether we'll be going to Indianapolis for our annual meeting in June. I guess obviously I don't think any of us could tell whether that's going to happen yet or not, or is it, or when we might make a decision on that. I certainly hope, for everyone's sake, we're on the other side of this by then, and it's back to business as usual. But the question about Detroit and where they fit in the future is obviously a question that you're not the first person to ask about that. And quite frankly, we just haven't spent any time talking about it whatsoever. But I'm sure that will be something we'll talk about when we get together. And, I just feel so bad for those guys. They put so much effort into, all things Frozen Four, and, promoting the event and trying to get a good crowd there and create a great experience with the athletes. And never mind the opportunity that I think we had talked about on our last call together, the three of us having some coney dogs together. So no coney dogs with you guys. So that's another loss.
Yeah. And it seems so far in the past now, even though it was just a few weeks ago. One of the things that has also been discussed is eligibility for players. Now, for spring sports, they already have said that they are going to push things off and allow players who have this season suspended get another year of eligibility. There's been some discussion, and apparently not a decision, at least not that I've seen, on extending some eligibility for winter sports players who lost their championship. Kind of a two-part question. Is this something that is being discussed? And then the second part, wearing both your NCAA committee chairman hats and also looking at it as a longtime athletic administrator. Is this something that's even practical?
Well, that's a good question, Ed. I just got a notice yesterday, I think it was, the NCAA set up some conference calls with all the member institutions to address some of these issues for next week. And so they've set up, I think, 3 or 4 calls where you can, find a date and time that works for you to jump in and dive into these issues, because maybe the spring sports, like you mentioned, that's a simple question. But, for these winter sports, especially so close to the end of their seasons, would there be any exception or leeway given to those student athletes I mean, you really think about it. We were at the end of everyone's regular season, and into the playoffs for every conference. And, I just, like I said earlier, there was a time last week when I thought, well, we could do an abbreviated championship and maybe an abbreviated NCAA, and just being tantalizingly close to the end of the college hockey season, and then just to have it all go away. I feel particularly bad for the seniors, and certainly the seniors, some of those teams that were at the top of the pairwise, that were really having a great finish to their college careers, and with the opportunity to win a national championship, just such a special moment, and then not to have that anymore. I just feel so bad for those guys.
In the process of this, I know it was moving very quickly. Did you mentioned about in the conferences, maybe an abbreviated conference playoffs, and I know a couple of conferences said that, well, if there is an NCAA tournament, our regular season winner will go in. Was there any discussion of any sort of an abbreviated Frozen Four, any kind of an ice hockey championship, or did things just move too quickly for that to even come up?
It moved too quickly with the NCAAs for that to come up, but at Hockey East, we had some brief conversation about, whether we could do it over kind of one long weekend as opposed to 2 weekends. But, it was moving so quickly, almost by the time someone had finished presenting the idea, the whole thing was over. But, could we have done something where we had a one-game quarterfinal series, and then 2 days later do a semifinal game at the high seed, and then 2 days later do a championship game at the high seed, and just do something in 4 or 5 days instead of, over a 10-day period. But, that opportunity soon went away also.
I know that there were some people out there asking the basketball committee to put out a bracket, even though there wasn't going to be a tournament. Did that ever come up? Did anybody ask about that?
No, that never came up. And I probably read the same stuff you read about the basketball bracket, and I agree with what they did, not to put that out. I mean, it's just too much uncertainty, and I guess I'm just not sure that would, best idea in my opinion. I did see plenty of other brackets, as I'm sure you guys did too, about restaurants and fast food and all kinds of other things to entertain people. And but as far as ice hockey putting out a bracket, we never discussed it.
More with Steve Metcalf in a moment.
This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Continuing now with UNH's Steve Metcalf. And certainly we all have to think about aspects of how life may change, how things may change going forward. It may be a little early to be thinking about this, but as a longtime athletics department administrator, could this mean some changes going forward in how we treat things like sanitary protocols and sharing equipment and those sorts of things?
Yeah, I do think there's going to be some kind of reset, if you will, on some of those kind of cleanliness, hygiene, sanitation, components that maybe we've just been too lax on, or we take for granted. And I was talking yesterday with a couple of the senior staff folks at UNH, and we were just talking about exactly this, about a reset and hand washing and sanitizing equipment, and things that we maybe should just be paying more attention to than we have, and this being an opportunity to do better in all those regards. And maybe that is some kind of positive that comes out of this as we go forward. But we at UNH had that conversation just yesterday.
Obviously, at the start of this call, we mentioned this is your
Yeah, I think that the highlights are always going to be recognizing the champions. And last year I had the privilege and the honor to present the national championship trophy, and those moments you just never forget. And being around a team that has just been crowned, the best in college hockey for that particular season. And in some cases, throughout the NCAA tournament, you may have, spent some time with a particular team or coaching staff, or even some of the athletes, to a lesser degree. You're kind of on a parallel track, going through and watching those teams have success, from a real insider's perspective. And I guess a great example would be, in 2016 in Tampa, Brad Berry's team won the NCAA championship. And that year, I believe they had played through the Cincinnati Regional, which I had been at. And then obviously I'd been at the Frozen Four. So I'd seen every one of their NCAA games, live and in person, and really up close and behind the scenes. And, I formed a friendship with Brad Berry and his staff, and had just spent a bunch of time with those guys, and just to see in the front row of the whole run through the postseason, and to see the celebration at the end of it. Those moments are the best moments about sports, and for the student athletes, unforgettable moments. And so, not having an opportunity to go through that one more year this year, and do it in Detroit with some of the folks I've got to know there, like I mentioned earlier, that put so much time into it. That's unfortunate. I think there's always work behind the scenes that goes into these events, and sometimes it's just work, but I really love the work. And, the folks at the NCAA are just fabulous people. And I've known, the core group of folks for almost 2 decades. And so I enjoy the people. I enjoy working with them, and, putting on a special event like the Frozen Four. And then, like I said, seeing it all the way through to the championship presentation really caps off for just a fabulous week. And, when you're there and you're talking with folks that love the same things you love, and seeing you guys, and it's a fun week. And now we'll miss that this year.
We certainly will. And Steve, we always appreciate your efforts on the committee, and getting to know you better. I think that you talk about getting how many people you got to know better, but I've known you since your early days at UNH. But now the more that we've got to know you as the chair of the committee, we really appreciate the transparency that you brought to that position. That's something that is valuable, I think, to the NCAA and to the media and to the fans for that matter. So we thank you for all that. We really look forward to continuing to get to work with you once this crazy life gets back to normal. We don't know when that'll be, but when you're the commissioner of Hockey East, we look forward to continue to work with you. So thanks so much for your time. Not the ending to the season we all wanted, but we really appreciate the effort that you put in. It's all for the good of the game of college hockey.
Well, great talking to you guys, and all the best, and stay safe, and hopefully I'll talk to you again real soon.
Well, Jim, it seems like it was years ago when we talked to Steve Metcalf about the Frozen Four and about him being chosen as the next commissioner of Hockey East, even though it was a few weeks ago. Last week was one of those weeks that was crazy. You and I were talking on the podcast a week ago Monday about the idea that maybe there was some overreaction. By Wednesday, we started to see things happen. I think the domino that knocked over the string of dominoes was the NBA suspending its season. Thursday morning, we saw leagues suspending having any fans at games. And then by a couple hours later, early afternoon, each conference said that they were canceling their conference playoffs and then the NCAA late Thursday afternoon. And I know that there's a lot of disappointment, and it had to be head spinning for a guy like Steve Metcalf chairing the committee. But, as we look back on that, it's hard to believe that we could take it not lightly, but not with the urgency that has swept the whole U.S.
Well, I think that what was the most interesting thing of what Steve just said was how quickly everything could evolve, and that everybody understood the seriousness in literally a matter of minutes. That as soon as the NBA closed down and you knew that there was a positive test within the league and that it could be spreading quickly, they had to shut things down, and every single sports league in the world basically has followed suit. I did happen to see some pro bowling that was live from Las Vegas on Sunday, and that actually shocked me. That's the only live sports besides horse racing that I've seen in the last week. So it just shows you how seriously everybody quickly took things. But now we understand it totally makes sense. I think people are starting to finally get the right messaging, locally from the administration, federal administration, which I think had been so mixed message for a while. But even globally, people are seeing what happened in Italy and what's now happening in Spain. And you're hearing some more serious messages come out, and people are not, nobody's enjoying this, but people understand why. So then you go back to apply this to what happened within college hockey, the conferences. As you heard Steve say, it was a 3-minute phone call. Who's going to put the motion on the table? Who's going to second it? It's voted on. You're done. The season's over. And then you do the same thing with the NCAA internal meetings really quickly. It's all over. Tell the conferences, tell the schools, tell the administrators. And that was it. And it felt like, if you're a fan, if you're people in our position where we have jobs that kind of depend on it, it feels like just kind of the meteor that hits and everything's gone. And that's really what it was in terms of sports last week. And but I guess when we now can look back with some hindsight, we understand what really made it so easy. What I don't like to use the word easy, but quick and alacrious, like what made the decisions come so quickly.
I was also interested in what he had to say about protocols going forward. Well, if you've ever been in a dressing room, let me put it that way, you know what hockey's about. It's the equipment smells bad, everybody's in a close place and so forth. And when there's an illness that hits a player, it tends to spread through the team and other teams pretty quickly. So you could just imagine with something with that level of contagion. But I also want to ask about Detroit. I think that it's probably too much to ask moving dates for Pittsburgh and Boston at this juncture because you've got to schedule stuff so far ahead in other events. But if it were me and I had say over this, I would make Detroit a priority for 2023 and get the Motor City right back on board.
I agree. And listen, I agree what you probably said, that it is probably too difficult to move dates out, but I would ask the questions. I would see if Pittsburgh can move to 2 years from now. I would see if Boston can move to 3 years from now, and let Detroit maintain at least some of the momentum they had. They had all the planning in place. They were ready, and they were literally less than 30 days out from hosting a Frozen Four. And they were in a position that all the legwork was done. So if you could make some adjustments to the other two cities that were already in the queue, Pittsburgh and Boston, it would behoove you to do it next year, because you don't want to put yourself in a position 3 years from now where you've got to really reduplicate all the work. And that I think this committee, and this was one of the harder working committees, having gotten to know some people and some of the things they were doing from an effort perspective and promotions wise. I was really looking forward to this Frozen Four. They knew what they were doing, and they were going to try to do it right. So I don't know what the procedure will be. Obviously, Steve mentioned that was something that is typically discussed at the Frozen Four about what the future is, and they haven't had those discussions yet. But that said, Detroit should be a priority. This city put in a lot of effort. They've lost, I'm going to have to say, millions of dollars by not having this event. I'm not talking about the lost revenue for the city. I'm talking about the organizing committee. They put in millions of dollars worth of effort to get this Frozen Four and to be ready for it. So imagine what they've lost. Who knows what insurance type of things exist? I don't think they would. So I would like to see this city, this committee, these associations made whole.
Eligibility is something we talked about. It seems a little problematic with players who've played an entire season except for league and NCAA championships to get another year of eligibility, what it does for scholarships and room on rosters and things like that. I'm kind of a mixed feeling on this. I think it would be nice to make that available. My hunch is there would not be a lot of players that would take advantage of it. And if there were, I would not be surprised to see a number of those do it via the graduate transfer route, which has been growing and could really shake things up a little bit. Where do you stand on the whole eligibility question?
I would love to see players have the option potentially, but I'm not a coach. I've never tried to allocate 18 scholarships. I've never tried to manage admissions. I've never tried to manage roster size and all of that sort of thing. And that is a big question that comes into play, because if you were, say, getting rid of 4 seniors, I'm sure you had at least 4 new players coming into your program the next season. What do you do with them? Can you defer them? Some of these players may have already been deferred once based on different decisions that get made. If players stay when you think that they're going to leave and you have them, had them coming in this year, you've asked them to come in next year. Now you're going to push them off another year. So I think it's a really difficult situation. As our colleague Paula Weston mentioned to me when we were writing Tuesday Morning Quarterback this week, she said, very straightforward, she said, don't forget there were teams that they were already done. Their seasons were done. The teams that missed the playoffs, the teams that were eliminated the Saturday or Sunday prior to these decisions being made last week because their first rounds or their quarterfinal rounds had already been played in their conference playoffs. So can you just do it for the, I don't know, whatever was left, 40 or so teams that were remaining, or do you have to do it for all 60 teams? I mean, it's a really difficult question, and it's one that I don't think a lot of players are expecting to get a full year of eligibility back. So this might be one that's better left untouched. I understand doing it for the spring athletes. They never got to start their season. They never got to play a game. But for those athletes that, finished either their entire season or 97.5% of it, I think that it's at this point, as much as I'd love to see some of these players back, it's better just to say it's time to move on.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of USCHO Spotlight. And we certainly appreciate Steve Metcalf joining us and spending some time. We'll have probably one more, if not more than one more, but certainly one more episode of USCHO Spotlight coming up after the winners of the Hobie and the Humanitarian and the Richter Awards are announced, kind of just that final recap of the season. And we'll look forward to talking to you then. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll see you next time.
This has been the USCHO Spotlight, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.